Well, according to the New York Times, Israel is building a base or bases in central Gaza, which is an indication that they are there to stay. Do you have any comment on that? Is the administration able to do anything to undo this or to make sure that this does not happen?
Said, I've seen those reports, and I will leave it to the Israeli government to speak to their veracity or not. Certainly would not be for us to speak to, but on that site, if they are true, certainly they would be inconsistent with a number of the principles that Secretary Blinken laid out in Tokyo about a year ago of what our viewpoint is when it comes to the region and the future of the region. So firstly, that would most certainly be the case. And I think key among them is that there cannot be any reduction in territory of Gaza. Beyond that, there can also be no forced displacement of Palestinians from their home, and they must be allowed to return safely to their homes in the north as soon as the conditions allow. So first and foremost, should this be true, it would be inconsistent with the principles that the Secretary laid out in Tokyo. I will leave it to the Israeli government to speak to that reporting. It's really not for us to speak to.
But certainly you have the means to, to determine the veracity of these claims or these reports.
I don't have an.
You have to wait for the Israelis.
I don't have an.
We are building bases.
I don't have an assessment to offer from a peer side on
the United States is. It's not, it is involved in this process.
Side, as you so know, we don't have any boots on the ground in Gaza. Beyond that, I don't have. It's certainly not for us to speak to on the veracity of these. If they are, it would most certainly be inconsistent with what we want to see for the region, and certainly would be inconsistent with the principles that the Secretary laid out in Tokyo. And should they be true, it's certainly something that we will raise quite seriously with our partners in Israel. But I don't have an assessment to offer.
This must be one of the most surveilled pieces of real estate anywhere in the world, especially by the United States and by its allies. You can't tell me you don't know what's going on in Gaza.
Said, we of course know what's going on in Gaza. We of course are paying very close attention to what's happening in Gaza as it relates to this particular piece of reporting, which I'll just note comes from a media outlet. It's not any kind of government-to-government announcement or government-to engagement. I don't have anything else to offer beyond what I just said.
Well, I tell you that Volker Turk, the chief UN human rights person or chief human rights chief, Volker Turk, said this is the darkest moment in northern Gaza. He's saying that what is unfolding is a total disaster. It's a total catastrophe, and he's talking about killing, displacement, destruction, lack of food, starvation. All these things, all the trimmings that are happening in Gaza, and he's calling on you as, a signatory to the Geneva Convention. He's calling on everybody, as a matter of fact, to do something that you are obligated under the Geneva Convention to actually do something. Why are you not doing anything?
We are deeply concerned about the humanitarian toll in Gaza and the high number of civilian casualties, and we are continuing to press Israel to maximize and streamline the existing crossings and open more crossings to help further address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. On top of that, we want to see an end to the war, and that's what we're trying to accomplish, and that's what we have continued to be engaged on for quite some time now, and we'll continue to work at this till the very last hour of this administration.
Yeah, but being concerned and doing something are two separate things.
Said,
I'm sure there's a great deal of concern and there's a great deal of anger and frustration in this building, but we don't see any action.
Respectfully, Said, I would take issue with that because over the course of the totality of this conflict, when we have seen things that are inconsistent with what we want to see for the region, when we have seen things that are inconsistent for what we want to see for Gaza, when we've seen things that are inconsistent with what we want to see for the Palestinian people, we've said so. Sometimes we've said so publicly. Every time we've said so privately, and we have raised this directly with our partners in Israel. And I needn't point further than some of the specific areas in which we have asked for remediation when it comes to humanitarian aid. I would point back to the first days of the administration in which it was the work of this secretary that really helped unlock the initial influx of humanitarian aid. And in the ensuing months since then, it is the work of this department and others across the interagency that has continued to push for the use of additional border crossings, the use of additional tactics to further enhance humanitarian aid. We have taken appropriate action. We'll continue to take action, as I said, till the very last hour of this administration, when we see things that are inconsistent with what we want to see.
So let me just, on this point, we saw the statement issued by Matt last time about the meeting with Dermer, between the Secretary of State Blinken and Dermer, in which he says, he talked about the need to end the war and the need to get the hostages home and so on. Now, at the same time, earlier in the day, we saw a statement by the president-elect basically threatening to, wipe out and make whatever happened thus far in Gaza to seem like a picnic. Those are my words, not his words. But does that give you more incentive to do more things, and does it give it a sense of urgency to you that you got to do something and do it quick before the 20th of January?
What we are focused on, Saeed, is we are focused on using every ounce of energy and every time that we have available to bring this war to a close, to do everything we can to address the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and everything we can to make sure that the hostages can return home and bring this war to a conclusion and start having a serious diplomatic conversation of what we want the region to look like the day after. That's what we're focused on. There's only one president at a time. I will leave it to you all to ask the tough questions of the next administration starting on the 21st. But beyond that, I'm really not a spokesperson for them, so I will let them clarify whatever thoughts they have about the Middle East.
The coming administration. I'm saying that give you, that make you feel an urgent.
We are continuing to operate with the utmost urgency, and I think there's not really a public statement, whether it's from a former president or otherwise, that is going to impact that, because we are already operating at maximum urgency.
My last question, I asked Matt yesterday on the killing of the World Central Kitchen employees, and yesterday that was happening. I guess that happened on Sunday. Yesterday they killed one aid worker from Save the Children. I mean, if this had happened anywhere in the world, if it was happening in Ukraine or anywhere in Africa, wherever it is, you would be outraged. Why is there not even a whimper, not even an outrage?
We are, Saeed, we are outraged.
Not even a statement saying you condemn this.
Saeed, we are outraged, and we are wanting more information about this incident. We are concerned by that reported strike that killed the Save the Children aid worker in Khan Yunis. Our view is and has been that humanitarian workers must be protected so they can safely deliver aid, whether it be in Gaza or whether it be truly anywhere in the world. And as I said, the IDF needs to provide additional information about this incident. I'm not going to draw any conclusion on it until we have seen more information and are able to gather the facts. But broadly, we urge Israel to thoroughly and transparently investigate actions like these and take appropriate action in their system, including ensuring accountability for any violations within their system.
Do you condemn the killing of aid workers by the Israeli army?
Saeed, we of course condemn the intentional aid. We condemn the intentional killing of aid workers anywhere. As it relates to this specific incident, we have asked for additional information. I'm not going to draw any conclusion until that has happened. But of course, we are deeply concerned and troubled by this reported strike. And as you've heard me say, we think that aid workers need to be able to do their work, not just in Gaza, but in other places in the world. Jenny's patiently had her hand up. Go ahead.
Has the new channel of the civilian harm mechanism that you guys established with Israelis met yet?
It has not.
When will that meet?
I'm not going to offer a timeline on that. That's something that we're going to continue to work
Matt
towards.
suggested it would be in early December. Is that still what you're tracking?
Well, it's December 3rd, so I'm not gonna put a timeline on it, but we expect that to happen sometime soon. But I don't have a specific date to offer.
And then there was a meeting on humanitarian aid for Gaza in Cairo yesterday. Who represented the U.S.?
We did have representation from the United States and the State Department. I will have to double check the specific names, but I'm happy to check and get back to you. But we did participate in that
I have
forum.
a couple on Lebanon, but
Or do you want to?
Yeah, I had a couple on Lebanon.
Okay, great. Why don't we?
Where do you assess the ceasefire standing now? Do you still see it as being largely successful?
We do. Look, the ceasefire writ large is the result of intensive diplomatic effort over many months by the United States as well as partners in France working closely with Israel and Lebanon. Our hope and our expectation is that parties are going to abide by their commitments and that the ceasefire will continue to be implemented. We are continuing to support that implementation. We're working on continuing to build a robust mechanism that assesses the parties in addressing violations. We're working to support the LAF and continuing to work closely with UNIFIL, and we think that kind of work is essential to that.
9 Lebanese were killed yesterday in Israeli strikes on Lebanon. Do you see this as a violation of the ceasefire?
So there's a mechanism in place to address and speak to specific violations. On this specific incident, I don't know enough about the specific activity that took place to offer any kind of assessment, but in President Biden's remarks last week, he was pretty clear, and you saw the Secretary echo that if there is a direct threat to Israel's security, Israel has a right to defend themselves. But again, on this specific incident, I just don't have any assessment to offer.
Do the Israelis have the right under the agreement or a side agreement with the United States to adjudicate their own assessments of violations and then act accordingly, or is it only direct threats?
So I'm just not gonna offer
projectiles launched hours earlier?
On this specific incident, I'm just not going to offer an assessment or draw some kind of conclusion on what would fall in the parameters of a violation or not. I think you saw the president speak to this pretty clearly, that if there's a direct threat to Israel's security, Israel has a right to defend themselves. If Hezbollah or anyone else breaks the deal or poses a direct threat to Israel, then Israel certainly retains the right to self-defense, consistent with international law, consistent with what any country would do if they're facing a terrorist group that was pledged to their destruction. But again, on this specific incident, I just don't have an assessment to offer on how it necessarily comports with that.
And then last question, is the mechanism fully operational at this point?
That is my understanding. Yeah. Go ahead.
Netanyahu today said that Israel was committed to the ceasefire deal with with Hezbollah, but warned that it did not mean the war was over. What's your assessment of those comments?
I'm not gonna interpret the Prime Minister's comments. I will leave it to you all to ask his office to do that. From our perspective, we are doing everything we can to make sure that the parties abide by the ceasefire. As I said in response to Jenny's question, we want this ceasefire to be implemented. It has been a product of months and months and months of work between the United States and France and other partners, and we are committed to supporting that. Of course, as part of that caveat, as I said to Jenny, that if Israel's security is threatened, it has the right to defend itself. Hezbollah, at the end of the day, continues to be a terrorist organization, and we want to make sure that they can no longer act upon a springboard of terrorism onto the Israeli people. But I will leave it to the Prime Minister's office to offer any context to his comments.
And he said that Hezbollah had seriously violated the accord on Monday and that Israel had subsequently attacked more than 20 targets across Lebanon in retaliation. Is it Washington's assessment that Hezbollah had seriously violated the accord, as
there is a mechanism in place to address possible violations. As I said to Jenny, I don't have an assessment to offer on specific incidents. Our point of view is that we believe the ceasefire continues to be largely holding in place. As I said, there is mechanisms to address questions or to address violations. That is up and running. But beyond that, what we are focused on is working with partners to make sure that this ceasefire is continuing to hold and can continue to be implemented.
Did Israel coordinate with the U.S. at all ahead of this retaliation, or let you know that it was going to?
I don't have any assessment to offer on military action.
As part of the accord, would Israel have to notify you that it was going to retaliate?
Again, on the specific military pieces, I will let colleagues at the Pentagon speak to the ins and outs of that. Michel, go ahead.
Thank you. The new pressure Israel yesterday not to strike Beirut, as the Israelis have said?
Michelle, I'm not going to speak to private diplomatic conversations. Our perspective continues to be that all parties need to do everything possible to abide by the ceasefire. We'll continue to receive and assess reports of alleged violations of the ceasefire through the monitoring and implementation mechanism, and we are committed to helping the parties implement the ceasefire, as I said, through this robust monitoring mechanism that we hope will address such violations.
Is the U.S. Preparing to provide military aid to the Lebanese armed forces to implement the agreement?
I don't have any specific announcements to preview, Michelle, beyond just saying that the United States, of course, has been one of the largest supporters of the LAF over many, many years, but I don't have any specific announcement to preview or share.
On
Yeah.
Syria, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. Yesterday, Matt said that the U.S. Didn't support the opposition in their military movement. Today, the SDF, who are supported by the U.S., is expanding its influence in Deir ez-Zor province and expanding their territories too. Is the U.S. providing any support to them?
Michelle, what the events of the past 48 to 72 hours underscore is that this conflict can only end once and for all through what we view as a political settlement that's consistent with UN Security Council Resolution 2254. We think it's time to reinvigorate that political process, and we think that the only path forward is a UN-facilitated one. And certainly, our view is that certainly no country should be taking advantage of this particular incident, and really we are engaging with partners and allies with a consistent message is that any who sort of have power or who have influence over some of these actors is do everything that we can to continue to stress de-escalation.
But the SDF, who are supported by the U.S., are expanding their territories, and they are part of the military action in northeastern Syria today.
So again, our viewpoint continues to be that the only solution here is one that is Syrian-led, Syrian-inclusive, and reflective of the will of the Syrian people, and that would be one that is in line with UN Security Council Resolution 2254.
And finally, on
Yeah.
Iraq,
Yeah.
do you have any updates on the waiver on Iraq to import energy from Iran?
Sure. On November 7th, the department did renew Iraq's electricity waiver for the 23rd time since 2018. It was done so for an additional 120 days. We remain committed to reducing Iran's malign influence in the region. Our viewpoint is that a stable, sovereign, and secure Iraq is critical to these efforts. Since 2018, as you know, this started in the previous administration, the State Department has permitted Iraq to purchase Iranian electricity while Iraq continues to develop its own domestic generation capacity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Have you seen any progress from the Iraqi government to step up towards energy independence from Iran? Because there are reports that even Iran get $1 billion a year from Iraq since Prime Minister Soudani took office in 2022.
I think I've spoken a little bit about this before, DR, and I don't have any updated assessment to offer beyond we have seen some progress and steps in the right direction by the Iraqi government as it relates to their own sovereign domestic energy production. That continues to be the case. I don't have a different assessment to offer today.